Well, Mark, first of all, what was your reaction to the facility when you visited Las Vegas Motor Speedway for the first time? You didn't run the Busch race the first year, 97. So, what was your reaction when you first saw it?
So, I'd watched it on television, but hadn't been out there. And so we went out in January since, they'd been running the Bush races out there for a few years. I'd been watching that, but we went out to test in January. So to kind of bring you up to speed on 1998, that was the year that we moved our shop from Liberty, North Carolina, into Mooresville and a house next to Jeff Burton. And we started building cars at 50 there. Bobby Hudson and the guys there started building cars for me to run in 98. We started at 50, and JR 51 was our first intermediate car. And so in January, we took it out there, and one of my holdovers, I think, from Liberty. And JR 51 was about 2/10 faster than the other car. It was really fast. And I backed her in the fence. Love the place,
Yeah.
but I backed her in the fence. And since it was faster than the other car, we hammered it out and fixed it up and taped it up and finished our test with it and took it back home, and they repaired the car for the race and took it back, so it was quick. It turned out to be my favorite car for sure, and will always be imprinted in my memory. JR 51 was just a fantastic car. We won the inaugural race there in Vegas, and we took it to Texas and won Texas with it. Took it to California and won California with it, and took it to Michigan and won Michigan with it. So we won 4 races that year with that car. So more than I remember the facility itself, I remember that car being, our old reliable. We won 4 of 7 races in '98 with that car, and Landon Best recently acquired that car somewhere in a shed in North Carolina, somewhere down around Rockingham, and has it restored, and is just finishing up getting it running.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and it is absolutely period correct. It's got JR 51 inscribed on all kinds of the parts, seats and everything. It's got all kinds of original parts on it, and we're going to have it out for the Vegas race out there. So I think it will be really cool to have the car that won the inaugural race on hand and be able to share that with the fans and stuff.
There's obviously a lot to do and see in Vegas when you were there for testing and then the race itself. Did you have a chance to go out and see a show or whatever? Or were you pretty tied up with appearances and that kind of thing? Or is that just not Mark Martin's style?
So my miserable style was 100% focused on no nonsense cars, make them go faster. And I despised Vegas and dodged Vegas in every possible way. I dodged SEMA. My sponsors always wanted me to go out there. I dodged going out there. I hated going out there. But I went out to the test, did the test. We had a good test, and looked forward to the race itself, and always loved racing out there. And as I got a little bit more mature, I was almost 40 years old, and I was 39 years old, I think. I still wasn't mature by any means. As I got a little more mature, I started to appreciate the coolness of Vegas, the beauty of the strip and the casinos. And I picked up saw a few shows. I'm real particular about the kind of shows that I see. I'm not much into the plays and all that stuff is all goofy to me. But I saw multiple times. I saw Recycle Percussion, put on a show, and there's a lot of cool stuff to do there. Obviously, I don't drink, and I don't gamble, but dude, that place is fun for any. All you got to do is just walk down the street and people watch. It's a, it's
Yeah.
cool, and I developed an appreciation for it. As I finally grew up a little bit.
You had literally thousands upon thousands of laps at most other tracks, but Vegas was new. You said that you tested there. How steep was your learning curve on that particular facility? Did you take to it right away, or did it take a little getting used to?
Honestly, Rick, at that time, I was immersed in racing. My brain was always in a race car or under the hood or on a track. It's what I did. You know, it was on my mind 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. It wasn't nothing. I mean, it was just another track. I was used to going to new tracks. Had done it all through my late model career, and then every NASCAR track was new to me. And then we had some new ones come onto the schedule after I got going in NASCAR. Such as Texas and California and stuff. So it wasn't a big deal. It was a mile and a half. It was slightly different, obviously, than Charlotte or Texas, but it was a D-shaped oval with semi banking on it, and just another day at the office from that standpoint. However, I did have a lot of good fortune there. I guess I did just win only the inaugural Cup race, but I won a bunch of Xfinity Busch races there, and had a lot of great runs. I liked the racetrack. I liked the fact that it raced a little different than any of the other, mile and a halves. And one of the coolest things, and I can't explain it with any kind of elegance. I just don't have the words for it. But I was so immersed in performance that I never enjoyed any of it except just an instant when I crossed the finish line first. Those instants were euphoric. But by the time I would get to victory lane, and do the celebration, it was not that part of it was not fun because at that point I was in a hurry to get that finished, get that over with, and get the media stuff over with. And because I was already thinking about how in the hell can we do this again next Sunday.
Wow.
And I was totally consumed before I got out of the victory celebration. I was already consumed with how are we going to do this again next week? And so when we leave, it was because of our inaugural race, there was a lot of media, and the media took a long, long time. And I took my time, and did every interview and all that stuff that they wanted me to do. And so it was nearly dark when we got finished, and I was helicoptering back then to the airport after the races, and the helicopter came back and waited for me. I mean, it flew all afternoon, and they came back and waited for me. I mean, everybody was gone, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The place was evacuated. I mean, there was,
Yeah.
and as that helicopter lifted off, and I got that view down onto the racetrack, it hit me what I had done, what we had done and what we had accomplished. And for one instant, it was like a snapshot in time, and it was once again a euphoric feeling just for an instant. of wow,
Yeah.
we won this thing. And that was not like me. I didn't ever reflect very much, and it was just an instant. But it's something that I will remember for the rest of my life. It was just a weird instant that I realized what we had just done, how hard it had been, how long and hard I had fought to finally get where I could win NASCAR Cup races, and that it was a big deal. It wasn't just another day at the racetrack.
Awesome. You started from the pole in the Busch race, but you finished sixth. And at that time, finishing sixth for Mark Martin and Roush Racing in the Busch series, that was almost like a DNF for somebody else. How much of a concern was that for Sunday's Cup race, or did that even play into your thinking at all?
Yeah, I don't have vivid memories of the race, the Xfinity race. Um, Obviously, we did something wrong. We either missed the setup, or we pitted wrong, or we did something wrong, because that wasn't on the level of that Winn-Dixie car, for sure. Um, but yeah, it was just another day, and you slot that into the brain, and there may have been some setup things that I carried over. A lot of the reason I ran the Busch races back then, uh, there were multiple reasons, but one of the large reasons was I still wanted to learn every ounce I could from about tire, about chassis setup, about aero, and about racetracks. So, I would take that over, and I was heavily involved in the chassis setups at that time. In fact, it was my setup that I was putting into the Busch car. Like, I was the one that would pick the entire springs, shocks and all that stuff. And I was heavily involved with Jimmy Finney, at that time, with everything that went under the six car. So I remember a little bit of what springs were in the car, for that race. But there are other races like the 1993 Phoenix race. I can tell you all the springs, the shocks, the sway bar, uh, roughly very close to weight distribution, the Panhard bar height, and everything from that particular race. And there are a number of other races that could do the same. So, but I can go all the way back. I'm not really a savant on
Yeah.
NASCAR setup stuff like I was. You can show me a picture of 1978. When we won the Redbud 300, and I can look at the car and I can tell you the springs, shocks, sway bar, weight distribution, Panhard bar height, tire stagger, and everything from the Redbud 400 that from 1978. So I can do that on almost every time you can show me a picture and at a racetrack of that car. It just comes back to me. I mean, I was the one that did it. I did the tires, I did the chassis setups, and the tire stagger and the setup meant the difference in winning and losing. Why in the heck wouldn't I remember what was
Wow.
in it? It
Yeah.
was the most important thing in the world to me at that time.
120 laps or so into the Cup race, your car developed a pretty substantial vibration due to a problem in the transmission. How bad did it get that day?
It got enough that I was really concerned about it. And if you check back in my history, I have an enormous amount of DNFs and struggles. Uh, we had a lot of trouble, mechanical problems at Roush Racing through the late '80s and early '90s, and so this wasn't anything really new to me, but it was a concern. I don't remember what the final verdict was, but whatever it was, we didn't wind up breaking. But I was certainly concerned that we were fixing to experience a DNF.
Fords were really strong that day, the day of the inaugural Cup race at Las Vegas. There were 13 of the top 14, 13 of the top 14 finishers that day were in Fords. Was there any one specific thing that made the Fords better, or was it just a combination? Was it just the whole complete package that made them good?
Oh, it was aero, and you know, we being Ford and the teams that developed the Taurus made dang sure that it was a damn good race car, and especially from a downforce side of it, because 90% of our schedule was downforce racing. So the Taurus came out of the box with a very good downforce package, and so Vegas was the third or fourth race on the schedule, and they clipped the wings. You know, started clipping um, on Monday morning after Vegas. We got a clip, and we got more clips throughout the season. But you know, I'm not going to say I wasn't biased, but it appeared that Chevrolet had a stronger voice in what NASCAR did. GM was you know better situated politically with NASCAR than Ford was at that time in that era, and for good reason. I mean they worked harder at it than Ford did to be you know positioned better. So they certainly didn't. Chevrolet didn't take that laying down the beating that they took at Vegas. And they had already seen some of that coming at Rockingham as well. So they had had enough, and so there were, you know, they started clipping spoilers and stuff right away after after Vegas.
You mentioned going to Victory Lane and trying to get through that and all that, but at Vegas, you were met with Showgirls and Wayne Newton, and certainly that had to be something out of the ordinary for Mark Martin.
You know, and here I am. You know, dude, I'm a weird person, and I understand that. If you didn't live around me close enough to be in my head, it's probably hard for me to describe what kind of psycho fool I was about racing. I knew more about the cars and the tires and everything that was going on the tracks and everything else than anybody else around me. That was my advantage. Like I didn't rely on driving skills to win races. I relied on all those other things to win races. And I was just a no nonsense guy. And I was, you know, to some degree, a little bit miserable, you know, just really was when I look back on it. David Lovendahl nicknamed me Prick of Misery. And another nickname he had for me was the Little Hemorrhoid. But that was from the 80s when he worked for me, you know, because I was a taskmaster. I wanted everybody to work as hard as I did. And I pushed everyone that worked for me. And so that's a long winded answer to your thing. The Showgirls scared me. I wasn't, you know, I mean, I
Yeah.
just was a little bit scared. You know, I don't know why, but I'm not saying they were pretty. They looked different. They scared me like, are these men dressed up as women or are these women? What the hell? You know,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
was kind of like, whoa,
Yeah.
you know, let me get this picture and move on here. And that was cool to have Wayne Newton there, who's an icon, you know, then, before then, and still now today. So that was interesting. But it was a very interesting photo, and And my response to having those girls beside me on each side taking the picture, you don't see it on my face, but I'm like, let's get this over with.
Mark, that year you mentioned it earlier, you went on to win 7 races on the Cup side, the most you ever won in a single season. And you've kind of touched on it, but how did you measure success? Just simply by the next week, or was it wins? Was it consistency? Or was it the championship big picture? How did Mark Martin define success that season?
Oh, I think by the wins, by
Okay.
wins. For me, I had already shifted from in my early years, winning championships was a way to get recognition and a way to stair step. So that was where, track championships, ASA Rookie of the Year, ASA National Championships, all those things propelled my career and laid the foundation for NASCAR. Once I got into, NASCAR and took my beating and whipping and lost everything and had to go back and start over my career all over again, things kind of changed. And my shift started shifting toward wins are really important. And they became more important to me than chasing championships. Now, we did, in 84, I got my feet back under me and started late model racing. And by 86, we did win the ASA championship again, and that was good. That springboarded me. But over the course of, those 2 years, 85 and 86, I'd won 9 ASA races out of about, 30 or 35 races. So that had been really good for me. Got into NASCAR, back in the, Jack's car, the 6 car, and I ran second 6 times. And that was about to drive all of us up the wall. And so we finally got that win in '89 at Rockingham with JR10, by the way, which is a whole nother story. That's the other car that's historic. But that's a different story for a different time. Then, we went into 1990 and just, man, we were cleaning their clock points wise. And it was very important to win a NASCAR championship. And we scored more points than anybody else that year, but we had a penalty that after the second race of the season, and still thought we'd just go on and win the championship. And we led the points from sometime, I think, in May all the way to the next to last race. And Earnhardt overtook us and beat us for that championship. And over the, I didn't take it that hard. I took it hard, as anybody would that got beat, but I didn't take it that hard because it's like, dude, we just finished third in the points in '89, and in '90 we finished second. We're going to win a championship, any year now. Well, by '98, you're starting to question.
Yeah.
We keep ringing the bell and we keep winning races, but we ain't winning championships. But the thing that keeps bringing our sponsors back and bringing talented people and keeping sponsors and talented people are not championships, they're wins. And so I recognized that was the glue that held my career together, were wins. And so that became the highest priority, was being able to win races, because that kept me in business.
Awesome. Good deal.
I knew what it was like to not have a ride. I knew what it was like to be underfunded or broke or bankrupt. But, I knew what it was like to not be able to get a ride. In 1984, Daytona 500, I stood outside the garage. I did not have a garage pass. I stood outside the garage area fence and I looked inside and I looked at those drivers walking across from that garage. You remember the garage to the hauler, walking back and forth. And I looked at those guys, and I wasn't looking at Cale Yarborough and David Pearson. I was looking at your Sterling Marlins and guys like that had rides. And I said to myself, I can beat those guys, but I couldn't even get in. I had no business in the garage. I didn't ask for a garage pass because I didn't have any business in the garage. Didn't have a ride. So I knew what that was like. And that never left me. My entire career till I retired, I never forgot being the guy that couldn't get a ride.
Yeah. Wow. I know that feeling, Mark. I know exactly what you're talking. Las Vegas Motor Speedway, October 14th through the 16th, you're going to be taking part in Champions Week that they have put together, and you're going to have the JR51 car there. You're going to be there. That's going to be a pretty big deal for you, isn't it?
It's a really big deal for multiple reasons, but for the most part, because this car needs to become a legendary car, because it's pristine, it's still there, and it's 24 years since it won that race, and won 4 races in one season, and it will be extremely cool 24 years from now. And we don't recognize how important history is until we get way down the road. I mean, it doesn't even occur to us what's going on a racetrack in 2022, how cool it really is. It doesn't even occur to us. You give us 25 years and we'll look back at 2022 and marvel at the cars and at what we saw. So yeah, it's really important to be able to share that car with the fans. I really salute Las Vegas Motor Speedway and Chris Powell and all the people there at the Speedway for recognizing the thirst for the golden era, in my opinion, of NASCAR, and that's the 80s and 90s era, and embracing, their history and the heritage. The fans really, and you know this because that's what your program's all about, your podcast and what you do. The fans are crazy about that era. Just watched your podcast with DK Ulrich. Man, that thing is gold. It is just gold. I was there. I raced with that all day unit. I raced against that all day, and just the stuff that you're doing. So anyway, I don't want to get off track. Yes, I really salute them. I'm honored to be their first one. It makes sense since I won their inaugural race. But what's cool is they're going to do it again next year with another legend, and then the following year with another legend. And the sport needs to be embracing the really deep history. And we're coming up on the 75th anniversary, and that's going to be a lot of fun next year, sort of reliving some of our history and stuff. But we need to cling on to that because the fans love it. There are so many fans that really support that. And I think the love for that, the more we can show them and then entertain them with the history of the sport, the more they'll love what they're seeing today.
All right. Good deal, man. Anything else you'd like to add in particular?
No, man. I love what you're doing. I think it's really cool. I think it goes hand in hand. There is yeah, let's go back on.
Yeah.
Let me kind
Yeah.
of tag on to the end of that.
Yeah.
And then there's another thing too. You know, my son Matt has been actively involved in a lot of this history stuff with my career. He uh, he encouraged me to do a book, and so we're in the middle of doing a book that I wasn't interested in doing until he got me on it, but we're deep enough into it now that I'm really excited about it because it's going to be about the struggle and the human story a lot more than it is about winning the races.
Yeah.
People that know me know I won races. I don't need to gloat about that. Um, it talks about the things that I didn't do or weren't able to accomplish or that I fell down to and the times I fell down and got back up. And so in doing that, even though he's not authoring it, he is guiding it and he's done a lot of historical research. He knows more about the 90s in my career, way more than I do. He can tell a 92 from a 93 from a 94 or 95 car. I can't. You show me a
Wow.
picture, I don't know which year it is, but he can tell. But each year, even though they were similar paint jobs, he's learned so much. And he started Mark Martin Archive, and it started with a um, Instagram page. So it's just Mark Martin Archive on Instagram. And that was so popular, and he's got so many followers, and he's doing such great historical posts that kind of led into merchandise. And he's had some merchandise on markmartinarchive.com for about 3 weeks now, and it's just been overwhelming, this response from that. So we have an incredible amount of super cool stuff, or he does, super cool stuff in the works for that archive and archive page and merchandise wise. So that kind of comes along with JR51 and all the stuff that we're doing at Vegas. So if you want to see some cool photos and follow along on our journey here at the Las Vegas weekend, starting with Thursday, signing autographs at South Point Casino all the way through the weekend. Mark Martin Archive on Instagram is the way to do it because he's going to be tagging along and doing a lot of photos. And there's just it's a good historical page. It's for anybody that loves old school, NASCAR racing.